Okay, we will make a start and others can join us as we go on through this workshop. Welcome, croeso to all to this PAVO AGM workshop, Social Recovery. Thank you for choosing to be part of this workshop today, which is planned for 1.5 hours. We're expecting approximately 50 plus participants in today's meeting, so hopefully that'll lead to some really engaging conversations. And please feel free to ask any questions to our guest speakers at the end of all 4 presentations. Myself, along with Michael Blees, PAVO Development Officer, and Claire Sterry, Senior Officer of the Third Sector of Development team, will lead this afternoon's workshop. I'm Sharon Healy. I'm the Senior Officer for PAVO Community Connector Service and Powys Befriending Service. We also have support from 3 community connectors: Sally Richards, Estragonus Connector, Diane Jones, Newtown and Montgomery Connector, and Sinead Pritchard, McCuntleth Connector, who are going to be helping facilitate one of the 6 breakout rooms later on in the session. Social recovery, past, present, and future. The response of COVID-19 to the COVID-19 pandemic throughout Powys, the support in our communities for individuals and for statutory services has been tremendous and really humbling. I'm very proud to work in the third sector and support voluntary organisations, especially in my own community. We've all witnessed such resilience and willingness to look after each other like never before, and we really need to harness and build on this in our communities. In order to support and coordinate the explosion in voluntary activity during the COVID-19 pandemic, at the start of the pandemic, the Regional Partnership Board established the Community Sector Emergency Response Team, CSERT, and that was led by PAVO. The CSERT team connected with 120 new COVID-19 voluntary initiatives across the county through the Community Connector Service, supporting and coordinating this voluntary action in each of the areas. 13 community locality networks were established to give support and join organisations together. These networks are continuing to be led by the connectors in locality areas. The Community Connector Service received a huge increase, 720%, in referrals into the service, and played a key role in supporting, shielding, and other vulnerable people throughout our communities. Although the work was really immense for us as a team, our duty line was open for 11 hours per day, 7 days a week, over 2 months. Our work in signposting or referring individuals to support in their communities had never been so easy, as there were so many local volunteers and community groups willing to support and help. There was formal volunteers and organisations ready to be deployed to help individuals in what mattered to them. The Powys Befriending Service has recruited many more volunteers and is supporting hundreds of clients via remote befriending, via telephone, thereby combating loneliness and social isolation. The CSERT team established processes to register, recruit and place health and care volunteers in statutory settings in partnership with Powys County Council, Powys Teaching Health Board. Over 400 volunteers were recruited and a number placed with pharmacies, GP practices and the Health Board itself, and we'll hear more about that later on. The team ensured that the voluntary sector received essential information in order that it might operate effectively during the COVID-19 period and beyond. It also distributed funding to sector to resource organisations to support individuals. In order to build on the significant achievements of CSERT, it's now been reconfigured into a community support and response group, CSRG, which I will speak about more later on in the session. We're now going to hear from our 4 guest speakers, who are going to tell us more about the work of the group they're involved with and what they carried out in their community and what they are now still supporting with and any future plans they may have. Our first speaker is going to be Claire Bounds from Llanidloes COVID-19 Community Support Group and supported by Graham Brand, Llanidloes COVID-19 Mutual Aid Fund. Claire coordinated a volunteer response to the Llanidloes area. The Llanidloes COVID-19 support group collected shopping and a handful of volunteers led by Claire were assigned to collect and deliver medication, working really closely with the Community Connector Service. Claire and the group have built on the community resources they have to create a food bank for the people of Llanidloes and the surrounding area called Lanny Pantry. Graham will then inform us of the setting up of Llanidloes COVID-19 Mutual Aid Fund in order for the donations the group received from the community to be administered. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you for asking me to come and talk today. What we did, it seems so long ago, but yet it's gone so fast, really. On the 16th of March, a school friend of mine contacted me who lives in Llanidloes and said, do you think we should set up a page on Facebook to help support members of the community? So that was the initial idea. The page was launched on the 16th of March. To date, we've got 1,300 members on that page. From that, we looked at what kind of support people may need. So the next day, I badgered Lanny Town Council for some money to design a flyer. This flyer was delivered by hand by volunteers from the community to 3,700 households within Lanny and District Parish. On that leaflet was basically a phone number, so people could ring if they needed shopping, any sort of help or support, mail taken to the post office, whatever it was they needed, or if they needed us to signpost them to other services. So once the flyer was printed and delivered to the households, we set about recruiting call handler volunteers. Initially, we started with 15 call handlers, and we worked 3 shifts per day. We covered 12 hours every day from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. Basically, I just had a phone, which I forwarded the calls to whichever call handler was on the rota for that particular day. They were amazing, absolutely amazing. But alongside that, we had to think about the process. So we set up a spreadsheet where we could all access it, so we could put on who took the call, who the caller was, their address, what their need was, and which volunteer was actually dispatched to that individual. That way we could keep, safeguard the volunteer plus the user at the other end of the phone. The process works seamlessly. It's still working today. Recently, I think when the shielding stopped, so around the 16th of August, we did reduce our phone hours to 3 hours per day, which was 9 till 12. Still carrying on today, taking calls, doing people shopping. So alongside the call handlers, we actually needed on the ground volunteers as well. So on our original support page, we put a call out for people who would like to volunteer. And we set up a closed Facebook page for those individuals. I think within the first 10 days, we had 136 people come forward to volunteer within the town. The reason we set up the closed Facebook page just for volunteers is when a call came in on the line, we could take the details and we'd just put a generic call out saying shopping required, town centre location. The volunteer would then come forward and say that they could help, and we would then message that volunteer separately, and just so that they could see again, so we were safeguarding the identity of the person needing help. From that, I should say the phones went live on the 19th of March, so we even beat the first lockdown date when that came in on the 23rd. We were already up and running. For the first couple of days, I stress tested the system myself, so that by the time I handed over to the other call handlers, we'd got rid of quite a few of the teething problems. From that, we then linked, as Sharon mentioned before, with PAVO for prescription deliveries. We were very aware that we needed, people were going to ask us to deliver prescriptions. So very quickly, we recruited 5 prescription deliverers, and we worked on a rota basis, which worked well for us, and it actually worked well for the PAVO team. So they knew each day which volunteer they were ringing, and us as volunteers knew which day we were actually doing. Then it moved on slightly, and I can see Mikkel actually on my screen. We then got approached to trial a app. It's a Can I Help app. And as a group of prescription deliverers, along with Claire, who was inputting the information PAVO side, we've actually trialed this system. And I have to say, it's so easy, it works so well. And it cut out the error really that could have been caused by taking down people's details manually. It was all there, it was very easy to use. Also out of the support group, lots of other things fell out of it that really we weren't kind of expecting at the very beginning. So we were thinking we were just going to deliver shopping, and then suddenly we found that there was a need for a food bank in Lanny, which we named Lanny Pantry. So that fell out of it and was set up. And again, with that came all the legislation. We had to register with environmental health, which we've done. We've just registered as a charity. We've just set off our charity status. So that was something that actually at the very beginning we didn't feel that there was a need, but more evidently there was a need. And Llanidloes people in the surrounding areas were getting support from either Llandrindod or Newtown, which meant the travelling just seemed silly when we could actually offer the service ourselves. So Lanny Pantry's been running since April. I think the 6th of April we helped our first client. And I have to say it's gone from strength to strength in terms of people volunteering to man the pantry, do the deliveries. Currently we're delivering to people to stop that people coming in and sort of contamination, cross-contamination. So we were looking for ways to eliminate danger for volunteers and also people actually using us. The people using us, unfortunately, week by week seems to be going up, and I think that's a sign of redundancies that we've had within the area and people on furlough. But again, we're there to help. Sharon also touched on our mutual aid fund, which I'm going to leave Graham talk a lot more about than me. But how this came about, when we were actually doing the deliveries, a lot of the people we were delivering to wanted to give us money. And we kept saying, no, you know, it's fine, we don't need money, it's a free service. But they wanted to do something. So we set up the mutual aid fund so that people could, if they wanted to, donate into that. It started off just by people we were actually taking shopping to and small amounts of money. Then quite a few organisations within Llanidloes wanted to actually donate as well. So it actually grew very quickly, the mutual aid fund. A lot of that money we're still supporting the pantry with. So that's primarily where we're up to with that. But in terms of how it works, because it's an online platform, as I say, I'll leave Graham explain that to you. The other thing what came from it, we actually set up a local befriending service. One of our volunteers had some experience in this area. So we set up a group of befrienders. And so that phone number was given to people that we thought were isolated within the area. We've had brilliant IT support from a computer shop in Llanidloes. And also alongside that, they are hosting our website, which was designed by a website designer from Llanidloes. So it's been a real community effort, and everybody wanted really to get involved. At present, so that was kind of where we've come from. Present, we're still doing all of those things. And surprisingly, we find ourselves doing a little bit more all the time. But I think the future is where I'm kind of got my eye at the moment in terms of when this is all over, because it's become clear that some of the people using our service had a need prior to COVID. COVID has actually brought a service to them, but their need was there before, and their need will be there going forward. So it's where we take our group in terms of the future plan. And we're all very keen to see it go on to the future and offer support to people within Llanidloes. I've got a few ideas how we can do that, but I can't publicly tell you because I need to get some sort of consensus and approval from particular members of the town first. But it is something that we've certainly got our eye on the ball. I mean, the community spirit here has been amazing. We've all met people that we would have never come across in our normal lives. And certainly a bridge has been built between generations within the town, and that's something that we're really keen to grow and move on in the future. I kind of think that's probably gives you a snapshot of where we're at. As you can tell, I can talk a lot, but I will hand over because I am conscious that we're on a bit of a timeline here. If Graham is there and wants to unmute himself and come forward and talk about the Mutual Aid Fund, that would be great. Over to you, Graham.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Yeah, Claire's explained the background to the COVID-19 support group and the Lanny Pantry. And as Claire and Alison were developing these projects, as Claire was saying, money was starting to come in, so there needed to be some way to manage those funds that they were accumulating. So we all know the problems involved and the time it takes to formally constitute a group and get a constitution and set up bank accounts and things. But Nick Venti from PAVO suggested they might want to use what's known as a fiscal hosting platform. Just by the way, I have done a few notes on this, which I forwarded to Ruth Middleton. I don't know if perhaps they can be sent out with the papers after this event. I've just tried to paste them into the chat thing, but all the links don't come through. Anyway, there's some of the things I will mention. There's links there that you can find out more about. It saves me going into a lot of detail on how the hosting platform works, but I'll give a brief outline to it. Anyway, this is what the group decided to do, and Nick sort of brought me in because I've got a bit of a background in community finance, having been involved in setting up the credit union in Newtown and also the Robert Owen Community Development Finance institution, which is also based in Newtown. So anyway, the fiscal hosting platform, the way that works, the mutual aid fund, we have no constitution, no bank account. People who want to donate money to us pay money into the bank account, which is run by a group called the Social Change Nest. And they run a fiscal hosting platform called Accountable. So the way this works is that money is paid into their account, marked for Llanidloes COVID-19 Mutual Aid Fund, and it's ring-fenced within that one bank account for our use. Only the 4 administrators of the Llanidloes Fund can actually access that money. So people can make donations either by bank transfer or by credit card or PayPal into the fund. And the 4 administrators can pay expenses to volunteers, again, through the hosting platform directly into the volunteers' bank accounts. So it does everything that you would need to do if the group had its own bank account, but saves all that trouble. It is all quite legitimate. There is an organisation called the Office of the Fundraising Regulator, something like that, I think it is. It's not regulated by the Charity Commission, it is regulated by this funding commissioner. So it works particularly well for sort of task and finish groups, if you like. If you're fundraising for a specific cause, you can raise funds quite legitimately this way. You don't need to register as a charity. So all we do really is raise funds and pay costs. The actual services in Llanidloes have been delivered either by the support group or the Lanny Pantry. I think it's worked quite well, considering that the Social Change Nest is running 161 of these mutual aid groups around the UK now. We've only really had one glitch, one payment in that seemed to have gone astray, but we think we've tracked that down now. So I would suggest, you know, to other fledgling groups, if they don't want all the trouble of constituting and setting up their own bank account, they might want to consider fiscal hosting platforms as an alternative. And I'm sure Nick Benty through PAVO can advise you more on that. The service is free for COVID groups at present, other than card fees and PayPal fees. But I think there are charges for other groups. As I said, on the notes I've done, there are links to how the fiscal hosting platform works and the work of the Social Change Nest. So have a look at those if you want to know more. As Claire was saying, the response from the community was quite amazing. And most of the support volunteers who were delivering prescriptions and getting shopping for people, most of those people actually didn't claim any expenses at all, which does demonstrate the strong social capital that we have in Llanidloes, and I'm sure many other communities in Paris as well. I think social capital is an interesting concept. If you don't know what it is, it's about networks of relationships amongst people within a community, and how that can be viewed as capital in a rather more important way than financial capital, really. I think, I'm sure we're all aware of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act that talks about building more resilient communities that are able to withstand shocks and strains of pandemics and economic disruptions. And the availability of this social capital, or community spirit, you might call it, I think is going to be more important than financial capital. So as Claire mentioned, to build on this community spirit that has come to the fore through the current crisis, the Mutual Aid Fund is looking to set up some way of asking our donors and volunteers what other kinds of projects and services we might want to support to meet other needs within our community. So that's all I've got to say now, really. If anyone has any specific questions about fiscal hosting fiscal hosting platform and how it works, I'm happy to answer them sometime, or have a look at the links, and hopefully that will tell you all. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Claire, and thank you, Graham, very much. And we will share the information you forwarded to Ruth earlier, Graham, to all the participants now this afternoon.
Thanks, Sharon.
Our next speaker is Lawrence Snowdon from Langorse Together. Lawrence coordinated the COVID-19 response in the community for Langorse and surrounding areas. Langorse is a smallish village in South Powys. He was supported by a sub-team of about 10 local village coordinators, checking on well-being, connecting shopping, prescriptions, and carrying out weekly phone calls to residents. They set up a 24-hour helpline for the community, and their support is ongoing, and I'm sure Lawrence will tell us a lot more about it now in his presentation. Thank you, Lawrence.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lawrence Snowdon. I am one of 3 deputies to the Langorse Together COVID-19 support group, which is led by Councillor Emily Durham, who gives her apologies, and I run the central hub team for the group. I'm sorry, I've cried 3 times this morning rehearsing this. I get a bit choked up reflecting on the past 8 months, as it, to us, is only really just beginning. The community I live in is only now starting to see COVID-19. I watch a growing amount of ambulances travel with blue lights along the Bulk to Tralgarth Road by my window. I only hope that we have prepared the community adequately and that we can provide support and reassurance to them through the linking in with other agencies like your good selves, and that we know who are potentially isolated or particularly vulnerable and can offer them help accordingly. I totally echo Claire earlier. Before I forget, I'd just like to thank you all in PAVO for guiding groups like Langorse Together and the unstinting assistance and backup that we draw from you. You should know that this is wholeheartedly appreciated. So, an early morning walk in March led to a chance meeting with Emily. We discussed the impending UK-wide lockdown and how prepared were we here in the Langorse Lake Ward. How it would affect the community, their reaction. Were they scared? Are they aware? Are they able to cope? But also, whilst I lived in a great, beautiful environment, like many of us, I knew little of whom was in the community, how it ran, who did what. I was aware of personally taking more than giving from it. And like a lot of people, had a sense of needing to volunteer. We talked about hope, looking back at the cavalry, and when would it arrive? Just like Claire, we decided that we should start something. The doing nothing wasn't an option. If no one needed assistance, great, but at least we would have given hope and provided a conduit for people to volunteer into. We talked about giving. We realized that there was this unfathomable urge by people to give. We got 55 volunteers that required organizing and supporting. We noticed a range of givers, from those who were just purely unstoppable to some that wanted badly to help but were shielded or vulnerable themselves. And some people seemed to sort of fade in and out a little bit with the giving, but that's all fine. As Claire said, the trick here was understanding what skills they could bring, what they felt comfortable to do, and as to what fitted their circumstances. And this was all in our return questionnaires, which we put out initially. I say unfathomable because we were all caught in headlights for 5 minutes. Where is this virus? Do I have the virus now? And will we succumb to it in a fortnight? And this was way back in March. So Councillor Emily and I came off that walk slightly epiphalized. Langorse Together was born, and with the quick help of friends, led to a leaflet drop. An initial volunteer meeting took place on the 18th of March, and that's the only physical meeting we've ever had. And an encompassing range of services were developed, which eventually mirrored council direction. For us, we thought this link to the council and legitimacy and legality was considered important by the group. We based ourselves around a central hub team to organise the activity, just like Claire. Key posts were established and tasks arranged to cover for a long-term period. This included hub team coordination and managing assistance requests, processing volunteer details, Facebook coordination, a person on welfare matters, and that was for just not only the residents, but for the group as well, which I'll come on to in a little bit later. Had someone internal comms doing Zoom contact lists who were good at that. We had a little bit on emergency liaison, but fortunately I've not had to use it. And then we looked at the wider communication needs, the contact with other support groups like yourselves and CSER, etc. And we did grocery and prescription services and a whole range of things that we could assist people with. So as you see on the slide, our target community is centered around the ward of Langorse Lake. We've got these local coordinators for our satellite villages. We plotted postcodes against in a nice app, which allowed us to zoom in and pinpoint the closest volunteer to a request. At an early stage, the group set up an email box, which was monitored by volunteers, and a mobile phone providing a 24-hour telephone contact service. It's amazing the amount of people who needed that service, who had like a slight dementia and things like that, and they felt comfortable using the phone rather than going onto the internet. We did assist a few lovely villagers whose weekly routine, I'd say, was just totally flummoxed by the lockdown. This made for building a huge trusting relationship with the assigned volunteer. We just didn't get the groceries. We found out where their relatives were, which doctor they had, who was going in for hospital appointments, etc., and their point of contact if they themselves became ill. We also set up a Facebook site at 228 followers, and we do a regular monthly newsletter. Just on that, on the Facebook, we noticed other Facebook sites had a lot of troll discussion going on them, and we made a decision to be intolerant on that sort of communication, and we just stopped it totally from the Facebook site. So the use of the coordinators has been vital. They've been uniquely placed to support our neighbourhoods, and when a request for assistance came in, it was discussed with them first to work out who was best suited to help, and this was always to aim for the long term. So at present, just in general admin, we hold fortnightly hub team tag-up meetings, and then we add the coordinators in at a monthly meeting. So just a very quick look at the past then. So like lots of communities the nation over, that our lake community worked together from the start. Like Claire, we assist in that spirit of mutual aid to make sure that nobody should feel alone if they didn't want to be. We weren't a group of expert care workers either, just ordinary people who saw this crisis as an event that might need some help to get through, both in mind and body, and also an opportunity just to get out there and know other people from the area. So in the 6 months that followed, the 55 volunteers did at least 495 hours of practical support. We also did other activities to collectively keep our spirits up, like competitions, and these were advertised on on our Facebook page. So here's just a couple of things we did. Simple things like this, just to bring people together and have something to talk about. A range of limericks.
Lawrence, sorry to stop you, but we can't actually see your screen. I can't. Oh. I don't know if anyone else can.
Can we see this now?
Yes, we can.
Right, okay, so here's Langorse Lake. Here's my dog, which was out walking. This is where I met the councillor, and we went through and discussed things. Led to the village hall meeting, and this was the app that we used for plotting out where postcodes were. It was a really good app to use, very simple. And now we're here at the past. So wherever I walked, we saw rainbows. That was the first limerick competition that we did. We also then went on to do a range of carecrows as opposed to scarecrows. And this actually started dragging people who were passing by and sort of put us on the map in a strange way. We had a tractor parade, which I'll go on to later. Simple things like tallest sunflower competition, and this started to bring in some of the children as well. And also, we only have one nursing home in the ward, and this is a very early slide, and these people came our adopted friends, and quite a regular spot to shed a tear. This is an early slide, and if you see them now in full PPE, it's a credit to them that they've reported no deaths through COVID, and indeed nobody of the staff catching the virus. So in the present, we now only concentrate on group delivered groceries. The only service we struggled with was to be engaged with livestock assistance to the farming community. We were aware of farms requiring assistance, but just couldn't break into that community to assist. We're currently involved with a range of improving wellbeing initiatives. We now involve the residents of Brookside with judging our competitions. And we have set up group creative opportunities, similar to Llandilos, with befriending services and a listening circle for people to get together virtually for a chat. And only last week, we had the local WI contact them to take part in that. So we assisted the PAVO with shielded residents and have been involved with your local meetings. And very recently, are honoured for a request to assist Sheffield University with a research project that they are doing. The unattended benefit has been that new residents to the area have described being more involved and have had an opportunity to get to know more people via contact through us and being made online, email, Zoom, and by phone, etc. And the social media interaction was very important. It gave a feel-good factor and in having a positive impact rather than a negative one that we sort of saw in other Facebook pages. We had, being a rural community, we had requests from relatives living out the area, even abroad, to assist family that were living in the ward. And sadly, we had to even assist in arranging one funeral, which was quite difficult to do. Many of the hub team have gone on to joining more established groups like yourselves and have just gained confidence through being involved. There were odd moments where mental health stresses were evident in the team. We allowed them some space to step back a bit from the volunteering, and it just enforced the message of mutual assistance. We have helped them where we could. For the future then, our action plan is evolving with the needs of the community. Planning is underway to boost Christmas morale with a real over-the-top range of activities. Now this is a deliberate ploy. The aim is to get as many people involved in the planning as possible, and hence they start interacting with each other and enforcing the communications, enforcing the hope for the future. In conclusion then, and just really a look forward, the community of togetherness and mutual aid has allowed us to directly assist those in the wards. Our local coordinators report that the neighbourly self-help is continuing, but there are perhaps some who are not seeing as much of their immediate families friends as desired due to the regional lockdown measures that happened previously, and now with England going slightly different to ourselves over in Wales. And as no one knows what will happen over the winter, we currently retain the group structure as is, and to be available to assist once more if the situation worsens. And as said previously, our group resilience and resolve remains firm and committed. So I apologise about the slides earlier. That's it, thank you. I'll take any questions.
That's great, thank you so much, Lawrence. We'll ask for questions now at the end once all the speakers have done their presentations, if that's okay, but thank you ever so much. Very informal, and it's inspiring what you've done in that area. Our next speaker is Natalie from Daladair. It's a charity based in Kerry. During COVID-19, they coordinated the community response there in the community, the recruitment of the volunteers, providing support for individuals as required, setting up a helpline for requests for support, whilst ensuring the safety of their volunteers was adhered to at all time. So I'll hand over to Natalie. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really inspiring to hear about the power of the community throughout Powys, as if we ever had reason to doubt it. So I'm a bit of a fraud, really, coming in as the director of Daladair today. I'm going to give you a brief overview and ideally share a video with you. We are a small charity that's set up in 2016. We primarily set up to support adults and young people with disabilities within the community. Our aims were to challenge the stereotypes held about our volunteers, but also to push the boundaries of what they themselves believe they can do. A recent example of this is, thanks to the lottery funding us, we were able to support our volunteers to complete their chainsaw qualifications. This was especially satisfying when our volunteers had been told they shouldn't use sharp objects in case they hurt themselves. Guess that showed everybody. At the moment, we're based on a 5-acre smallholding where we offer volunteer opportunities in land and animal-based placements. You'll often find us in the polytunnel, goat walking, or maybe completing some chicken therapy. When COVID-19 struck at the beginning of the year, we found our volunteers began contacting us really regularly, worried about people in crisis within their community. They were worried about regular people and families finding things hard. And I think one of our volunteers summed it up. He said, Nat, it's so easy for us as disabled people. We've been used to restrictions all our life. We can deal with this. We know how to cope, but we really want to help people that don't know how to deal with this. Well, what can you say to that? With emergency funding from PAVO, naturally, and from Community Foundation in Wales, we began. We know that people hate asking for help or to be thought of for needing charity, so we initially extended our food sharing project in partnership with Kerry volunteers. This redirected food waste from major suppliers such as Tesco's, Brakes and Morrison's, and allowed us to deliver over 200 food parcels a week during the crisis. Tesco's alone said we had managed to redirect over 2.5 tons of food waste, which would have gone to landfill. So kind of environmental benefits, as well as being able to support our communities. The Community Foundation in Wales funded a polytunnel so we could start sharing our fresh produce. We received funding to be able to hand out growing packs to community. And in fact, we handed out over 600 fruit trees during this time for people to be able to become engaged with what was going on at home. And of course, then the real community magic happened. In typical Kerry fashion, people started hearing about what we were trying to do. They went out for their daily exercise to have a look at what was going on. And of course, then skills started coming in all over the place for free. In just 12 weeks, we had over £50,000 worth of groundworks and voluntary support offered to us. And it was just so offhand. We had a tree surgeon call us. He said, look, I'm really busy at the moment, but would you like me to pop down and help? And we were like, that would be great. Well, I am busy. When would you like me? Whenever you can fit us in. I'll tell you what, I'll pop down just before my dinner. Lo and behold, our site was made ready for the polytunnel that evening. The other thing is, and I think this will resonate with all the professionals, none of these people were volunteers I'm not a volunteer, was their general attitude. I don't volunteer, I'm not doing good, I'm just helping out a bit, or I'm getting out the house, I'm getting away from the spouse, the dog, the kids. Whatever excuses they made, it wasn't true. They were there 12, 14 hours a day, helping us put in the infrastructure and prepare things to go out to the community, doing shopping, prescription runs, mending situations. We had people going out mending mobility scooters, greenhouses, stairs. It was unbelievable. And of course, once people started giving help, it was easier for them to say they needed help. As any good time banker knows, feeling valuable to society is not only vital to your own emotional well-being and mental well-being, but, you know, to society's well-being. We as professionals were able to deal with serious crisis, suicide intervention, emergency one-to-one support, while people just went on supporting each other with resources, with things, with helping out. But of course, it's not volunteering, it's just a local thing. We know that the next few years are going to be really, really hard. But we also know that it's our communities, the people who've just been talking to us about what they've done in their communities without the help of people like me, without the help of professionals. We know the power that they have. We know they've got the answers to supporting each other, empowering each other, and keeping each other safe. We also know that we're really lucky. We have grassroots foundations, people like PAVO, like Community Foundation in Wales, who are there supporting us. I didn't have to chase funding during this time. These organisations were ringing us going, what can we do? We know what you're doing. You can apply for this. Absolutely invaluable. Our resource time could be spent doing face-to-face work whilst distancing safely. So what are we going to do over the next couple of years? We want to open up our space and offer it to everyone, professionals, communities, volunteers, all of you guys. We want to share our resources. We want to give you the opportunity to share resources. We want to offer trauma counselling and support for key workers, all you guys out there on the front line who really, really had to make some tough decisions and see terrible things. We want to offer free training and well-being activities so we can all join in making us feel better about ourselves. Finally, we want to give professionals the opportunity to have training with our volunteers. Our community can give the answers. There is a resource that we cannot afford to pass up on. Join us.
Thank you, Nat. That's brilliant. And I, for one, can't wait to come up and join you and bring the Community Connected team up and have a team day out when we are allowed to have one. We'll definitely be booking that in the diaries.
For you, chicken therapy and the best chocolate brownies this side of Llynedd Lwys.
Yeah, you've sold it, totally sold it already. Thank you, Nat. Our next speaker is Lizzie from Powys Teaching Health Board. Lizzie's a project support officer, leading on volunteering in the health board and also developing a joint health and care volunteer engagement programme for managers. Thank you, Lizzie.
Thanks, Sharon. Wow, some really great presentations there to follow on from. So thank you for having me here today to speak. I am going to attempt to share my screen also. So let's see if this is going to work. Great. Thank you. So yeah, I'm Elizabeth Lowe. I'm leading on the health and care volunteers in across the health board at the moment. So pre-COVID, we had researched that we currently had over 47,000 different roles across Powys that our volunteers were carrying out. And COVID hit then, and there was a national call to recruit health and social care volunteers specifically. So PAVO very quickly responded to that and set up a memorandum of understanding with the health board, and they were then able to develop a new policy and procedure, and we could then deploy volunteers into virtual roles across the organisation. So originally there wasn't a consistent approach to volunteering in the health board, and there were just pockets that had grown organically, and now we've been able to centralise the process through our workforce and organisational development department, which is where I'm based. So back at the very beginning, after the call had just gone out, these are some of the figures that we had from PAVO that showed there was 348 people that registered almost immediately to say they wanted to help out, and then a breakdown of the various different roles. These numbers then started to reduce as people who were furloughed, which were the majority of the people who registered initially, as they started to then return to work. So those numbers are coming down now. All of the roles that we had pre-COVID were face-to-face in the health board, so we had to put them on hold due to the risks around continuing being in a healthcare environment. So these roles were administration. We had the Red Kite scheme, which is part of PAVO. All of our League of Friends were put on hold, and experts by experience and patient services assistants, and we were working with the Brontes Wellbeing Park members as well. So quite an instant reaction there. They all got paused, but it allowed us to establish new roles that to enhance the patient experience and support the service areas through COVID. So we moved the administration roles into a digital format so they can work from home. We developed anchor buddies and tech buddies that are working in our mental health department, supporting people in a befriending way. We've got an end-of-life care scheme, so we have companion volunteers that are going to be supporting that, again in a digital, virtual, telephone befriending way. We've created new lay member roles, so they sit on panels in a virtual way, but we are exploring roles in like wayfinding and meet and greet style environments at the moment, which will be face to face. This was just a slide from some of our volunteers that we have and why they wanted to volunteer, what it means to them, and there's some lovely comments on there, in particular investing in their own well-being and using their skills to then help other people. And it really does reflect everything that all of you have been saying today, really, about what our community want to do and want to put back. So the policy's in place now, and the MOU has been set up with PAVO and is working really well. We have a specific volunteer induction that is new since COVID, and again, the centralisation of all the volunteer data. Future roles that we're looking at is extending the tech buddy role across the whole organisation, so more than just mental health. There's also some breastfeeding peer support roles which we're looking into. In addition to that, very recently, the mass vaccination programme will be looked into, and we're looking at ways of supporting how volunteers can support that as well. So upscaling this broadly across the health board enabled us to recognise that we need an enhanced programme to do this effectively, and all the supporting materials that go with that, and linking in with the key decision makers, because we want to make sure that the programme of work is sustainable and it's well resourced. So we had a really positive response from our volunteers, and they were so open to just trying new roles and sticking with the health board and wanting to continue. We've got incredibly strong working relationships with PAVO. We don't know where we'd be without them, and the third sector, which enabled us to set up the MOU very swiftly, and the RPB supported us with funding. And we've adopted the TU Charter principles so that we take a more strategic approach now to volunteering, and it's very clear the distinction between paid roles and volunteer roles, and key stakeholder engagement right at the beginning to reduce delays wherever possible. So in summary then, volunteering for us upscaled at pace, and it was overall a really positive experience, even with having the face-to-face roles on hold at the moment. We knew that there were digital roles required, so this enabled them to develop, but it's also enabled us to see that we need a blend of both face-to-face and digital roles going forwards. But the most important thing is that it is resourced appropriately and that we have the correct infrastructure to be able to make this sustainable within a centralised team, and that's the direction that we're now heading. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you for your presentation. You can all now switch your videos back on. I mean, if you have got questions, we are going to be following up with an email following this session that you're welcome to send any questions to. We can forward them on to the speakers.
Could I ask a quick question of Nat, please?
Yes, certainly, Viv.
I was a volunteer for a few years, and I volunteer with people living with dementia and their carers. And I just wondered, your place looks wonderful. And after COVID, when we all come back out again, and I won't be doing garden visits in the rain, I wondered, could people with dementia, would it be a safe environment for them to come to?
Absolutely. We work with a number of people, older and younger, with dementia. We find that the animal and rural-based environment is really supportive. We do also have accommodation where we can provide supported holidays for people as well. So yeah, we welcome that. We know dementia has been a real challenge for people managing to access services and feeling very isolated. So we would love to open that up to
and people. Can they get a cup of tea there? That's the important thing, Nat.
Coffee, hot chocolate and biscuits is our favourite. We often do community lunches as well. PAVO, thank you, managed to find us some funding to be able to provide socially distanced group lunches. So we've sent some staff on chefing courses, and we regularly do group lunches.
It would be perfect for our Newtown group because we're not that far away. Thank you.
We would love to have you come and play with our chickens, and you know, make yourselves at home.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Sally. I want to introduce myself to Daldia as well. I'm working for CREDI, which is carers organisation, and I'm involved with the volunteer programme with that. So I'd really like to get an email for you as well. That would be really great. Are you open at the moment? Because we're actually looking at doing some outreach.
We're open 24/7, 365.
We want some. Great. So we want some safe places that we can come and perhaps invite a small group, just a few at a time too. That would be great. Thank you.
We're currently trying to access some funding programs for some extra support so that key workers like carers can access free services, but also some activities for some of the people that they care with if they can't come out on their own. So, you know, we will really be excited to tie in.
Great, thank you.
Brilliant, that's great connections made already. Thank you. Okay, we'll get on with the agenda. As I previously mentioned in my introduction, the Community Connected team facilitates and leads on 13 locality networks working across Powys. The purpose of these locality networks is just what we've witnessed, is linking up partners, organisations together to build upon effective working relationships within community, third sector and statutory services that were established during COVID-19 and previously before. Some of the networks were already established before COVID, but a lot have been developed during COVID. The network groups will continue to develop and maintain useful contacts and relationships by having a clear understanding of local community strengths, the resources in those communities, connections, shared learning, what works well, what didn't work well, what would you do differently, and identify gaps and opportunities and help initiate and the creation of new support arrangements of services to meet identified local community needs, like a lot of you have spoken about today. You're looking at that next step for yourselves. Each locality network is invited then to send a representative to the newly formed community support and response group. The purpose of this group is again to build upon the support and coordination of third sector activities across Powys during the COVID-19 pandemic. In partnership with all sectors and agencies, the group will take action and harness contributions of the voluntary sector across Powys in order to deliver what matters to people, improve the independence of individuals, and reduce the demands on statutory health and care services. If you're not already a member of your locality network, I would urge you to contact your local community connector service, which I can actually put you in touch with if you're not sure who it is, who will ensure you'll receive an invite to the next meeting. Our contact details will be sent to you after this workshop. I'm now going to hand over to Michael, who's going to talk about Volunteering Wales website and the task app that Claire Brown's previously mentioned, and how it can help and support you as a group.
Thanks, Sharon. I'll be brief because I'm mindful of time and I've had my instructions to be brief. Thank you. I'm Michael Blaise. I'm a PAVO Development Officer. Just to let you know, this is very much more a bit of information. We have a Volunteering Wales website, which is a national platform that we use to register all our volunteers. But it's not just a platform that we use ourselves. It can be used for other organizations as well. You can set yourself up there as a provider, so you can put your own opportunities on there. And it's a bit of a volunteering management system, which can be very useful, as a useful tool for people to use. And this is where we gather all the information for Welsh Government. So it really gives a clear picture of how well we do as volunteering organizations within Powys. So it's quite useful tool for us to use. And to give you a clear example on there, for example, we get our volunteers to log hours on there. And as it stands at the moment, 2/3 of all the hours on there are being logged in Powys. So we're doing rather well. But there's an awful lot more that we can do, and we're trying to encourage organizations to use it. We also have volunteer centers that can actually put your opportunities on there for you. So it is a real good platform to use. We're going to do some training sessions on that as well. So if you want any more information, we'll make sure you have all the links, and I will put, or Carl has already put the link in there, which I was going to do. Well done, Carl. So the link is in the chat. Linked from the Volunteering Wales website is a thing called the Task app. Now, Claire is already using that, and that is literally what it says. It is an app where you can put a task for your volunteers on there. And we started using that for the prescription volunteers in Llanidloes, almost as a testing exercise. It's a product that came a little bit late to the market for the pandemic, which is a bit of a shame. It should have been there a couple of months earlier and everybody would have been using it. But it is a really useful and fairly straightforward tool. It literally is what it is. You put a task out for your volunteers, you can allocate it to a specific volunteer, or you can almost put it out as a call out for volunteers. They get a message saying, can you help? The volunteer says, yes, I can help. And then they can say at the end of it, I've completed this. So potentially to actually, for all these different organizations that are doing these type of things at the moment, it might actually be something that would be useful for you to use. So if you're struggling with the systems that you got, or you think your systems are too time consuming, again, it's something we can teach you to use. It gives you access to, it's a fairly straightforward system. It didn't take me very much to teach the Llanidloes lot. I think we only had one session with them and they picked it up in no time. Claire McNiff is the administrator for the Llanidloes volunteers here. And I think, I'm sure Claire will back me up, I think it reduced her workload on that particular area by somewhere in the region of about 90%. So that's really all I want to say on it. There will be a certain amount of training sessions we're going to do on that, and you're very welcome to link in with that. If you need any more information, we will.
Great, thank you, Neil. I am conscious of time. We were going to give you 30 minutes in a breakout room, but we are due to finish about 4 o'clock. We will reduce the breakout room times down to just under 20 minutes, if that's okay. I have put the 3 questions we want you to discuss, or choose 1 question because of time in the breakout rooms. The question will be posed as put in the chat panel as well in your breakout room. So Claire McNiff, if you could press the button, please.
Out there.
Right, I've been sent at the last minute to kind of facilitate, but Pauline, are you helping out, are you?
We were just talking amongst ourselves really to make use of the time. And we've just Claire, Carter and myself have just had a bit chat about with the others about what we learned from the last 7 months. I just mentioned about how we remained effective. We've been able to have great one-to-one conversations with our clients. And then we've sort of handed things over to the local volunteers and coordinated that. And it's worked well for us in lots of respects, isn't it? We've made it work.
Yeah, yeah.
There we are, Sinead. I'll let you pick it up.
No, well, I was just going to volunteer that we choose one of the questions, maybe how do we visualise the future and what support is required to meet future needs, be that in the planning, any procedures or help to secure funding. How does everybody feel about the future, and you know, have we, through our dealing with the pandemic and barriers we faced, have we recognised any needs going forward?
Well, can I just say again, from a Powys County Council perspective, we are very hindered by the IT and our internal firewalls. So we can't just do things on IT that other people can do. They're very, very restricted. So for instance, we don't have the facility to use Zoom. And I know a lot of people find Zoom quite a useful tool or platform to use. And again, we're not allowed out. So all of ours is phone and email at the moment. And looking forward, I can't see when they're allowing us to go out date will be at the moment. There's certainly nothing on the horizon. So I feel we're very limited at the moment, quite stymied by, well, possibly bureaucracy and IT. But we do have to stay safe. We don't want to go out and not be safe. So they've said, don't go, don't do it. So it's hard to engage.
Yeah, Claire, how many of you have been assigned to do other work, like the test and trace and the contacts? Have a lot of you been involved with that?
Well, originally we were transferred onto the welfare calls, which was excellent. That was really good and really useful, doing the welfare calls. And now we've gone back into our roles as engagement. And so we are engaging, but like I said, it's just phone calls and just emails engagement.
Jen may want to tell us a little bit about what, tell the group what she's hoping to do to help us to reach people a little bit better than we have been doing.
Well, yeah, sure. What I am doing is I've just been appointed as the Digital Outreach Inclusion Officer for the Befriending Service to reach out to people who are socially isolated and lonely, but who don't have the digital skills to be digitally included. So it's about enabling the volunteers and upskilling volunteers to be able to then support the clients to access things online. Because it's great, we've got the telephone befrienders, like you were saying, Claire, that you can access people via telephone, which is wonderful. But if all you get is one phone call a week and you can't say join in on something like this, that's a lot of time where you are still socially isolated and lonely. If you can just have these sorts of conversations, and it helps people with sensory loss as well, of people that have got a hearing impaired, they can still lip read via a screen and they can join in group things like that, but it's not always that easy over a phone to do that. So looking at
are your volunteers, sorry, are your volunteers allowed to go actually to see people face to face?
No, not at the moment, no.
No.
So then obviously the other issues we've got is that it needs to be someone who's got some level of skill already. They need to be able to switch a device on, because you've got all those people who have got absolutely no idea that you really need to go and see them in person. You really need to be there with them to almost handhold through the process. And at the moment, we can't do that at the moment. But I know there's a lot of talks, a lot of people who've come together. There's a Credi meeting, not last week, the week before, I think, and everyone's finding the same thing. And I think there's strategies within the council and the health board as well to get people digitally active, to get people, you know, included. And there's all sorts of issues around equipment and connectivity. So it's a bit of an uphill thing, but you know, it's just getting that ball rolling, isn't it? And making a start and making those inroads. Because we all know the effects of social isolation and loneliness on people's mental and physical well-being is huge. So that's what I'm doing, I'm trying to do anyway.
Right, it's a great initiative, and it's an investment for the future, because once people are trained and the volunteers are trained, the clients are trained, we know that's a skill for life, don't we?
It is a skill for life.
If we're not going back to business as normal, what could be better than that? It is the investment now. So that's good. That is planning ahead, isn't it?
Definitely. And whilst there are people looking at the digital world, you know, there are people looking at not leaving people behind as well, and digital isn't for everybody. You know, through the winter months, there's work to be done at looking at people who can't or having difficulty engaging with the digital world as well, and thinking of other ways and means of including everybody.
And I think what's been really clear this week from being to a few of the workshops, and actually my perspective on it all along, is it's not it's never meant to replace something. It's to complement what's already there. And at the moment, we can't do what we would usually do, so it is just digital. But when things do start to resume, it's to complement existing things as well, and add to and enhance rather than replace. I think if we just lived in a digital world with nothing else, it would be quite a sad place to be, I think. But
I think one of the things for us as well, sorry to go on, is that we've discovered how bad we've been at keeping our data up to date with people's current mobile phone numbers and current emails. And although lots of people used to have a landline and that was it, so few people keep a landline these days, and so many people keep a mobile phone, but they change them. So you can be ringing a number and that number doesn't work anymore. Well, then it's very hard to get hold of people because they don't all keep that landline going as a landline anymore. So things are changing quite rapidly about how we communicate in our mobile phone, what we keep as mobile phones, and we don't keep our numbers up to date with everybody.
That's a simple, basic thing, isn't it, really? If you can't get hold of somebody by the phone in these circumstances, you wonder why the council perhaps don't, you know, with the help of the local newspapers, put that message out. Please update us, because we can't get hold of you if you don't update us, because people are unaware, aren't they, of lots of these things going on.
Yeah, I think you change your phone and you might tell all your mates, but you might not even think that you're going to tell the council your new phone number.
Yeah, the only people you hear from then are the scammers who've got access to a much richer database. That's right.
Yes, yes.
And one other factor, I suppose, that to chip in briefly, that is relevant here is the difficulty that people face in terms of accessing primary care and so on. And some of the people that we've spoken of would be the kind of people who from time to time be in the doctor's surgery in the old normal, and either in the waiting room engaging with others, going to see the doctor or the nurse, and now that's just another aspect where that social interaction isn't possible for very good reasons, but the cumulative effect is really severe. You know,
as community connectors, what we do is we keep in touch with our local surgery and ask them for any referrals.
Yeah.
And then they pass people back to us we can contact and offer them support then and signpost to them. So we're hoping we're filling that gap.
Well, absolutely. You and Annabelle and your colleagues are lifelines, really, in that respect. But it's a big job of work because there's so many barriers, aren't there?
Oh, yeah, very much so.
Yeah, it's doing our best really to link in with sort of professionals, healthcare and everybody in the area to make sure between us we're reaching the most vulnerable and the the lonely, the people that need a bit of support and care. Yeah.
I think it is, as you say, how we make contact with the most vulnerable people. Because in Llanidloes, those of us that are running these schemes, we're certainly not amongst the most disadvantaged in the community. So, how do we reach those people that perhaps wouldn't normally come forward? As I said in my talk, we're looking to ask local people what they feel the needs are in our community that perhaps the fund could help support. And through the work of the pantry, the food bank, I know Adele there is talking to the users of the pantry to find out more about the background and, what they're in the position of needing to come to a food bank. Offering some support and counselling. But I think that's an important thing to consider is because I don't think any of us would consider ourselves to be in the most disadvantaged category.
No.
Real needs of those people and how do we contact?
So feeding back, I think we need to, just an overview of what we discussed. It's making sure that sort of everybody is included where they want to be included in the digital sort of arena, but also making sure that we're not letting anybody sort of fall through the cracks, I guess, and recognising and finding out about those vulnerable people in the community that need support. So using community links and existing groups to reach out. Would that be fair to say? Hopefully.
Yes, very much.
Okay, so there's three questions. What have you learned from the past 7 months dealing with the pandemic and the barriers that you faced? The other question is, what issues are you presently supporting in your community or through your organization? And the third question is, what do you visualize the future and what support is required to meet future needs? Planning, procedures, or help to secure funding are examples. So we got 20 minutes, so we haven't got that much time to discuss this, but we're quite a small group, so we might be able to get through quite a bit. So over to you guys. What do you think? What do you want to tackle? Do you want to tackle one particular question, or do you want to do all three of them?
Leslie,
you're on mute, Leslie. No, you're not on mute, but I can't hear you, Leslie. Right. Owen, Sheila, any comments?
Well, only insofar as there's been a lot of people coming forward as volunteers during this COVID, a lot of people manning the pumps, volunteering unpaid, volunteering paid, from what I understand. As we come out of pandemic, we're still going to require, to some extent, a lot of input within the community while the normal services are resumed. Will there be a tailing off of the volunteers that puts a lot of pressure then on the system?
Okay.
Just
in other words, there's
Edwin,
the potential to have a void of person power in the future.
Yeah.
Just touching on that, from the experience we've had, in terms of the initial sort of surge of volunteers, what joined us then back in March, and I think somebody mentioned it a bit earlier in terms of the tail off once people were going back to work, once the lockdown had finished. We had a lot of people going back to work. In fact, in the lockdown period, when we actually put a request up for help, the calls were answered. It was highly unlikely that a call for help would sit there longer than 5 minutes. Now, once people have started going back to work, people were resuming their normal pattern. On occasions, we've had to actually private message certain volunteers to see if they could actually come forward and answer the call. So in terms of the numbers, they've certainly, sorry, I just had a little face poke in through the door. They've certainly reduced, and it is a case of trying to re-engage some of them, I think, to do sort of evening, weekends, that type of thing.
We found a similar position with the befriending service. We had an initial massive surge of offers of help and recruited an awful lot of volunteers. But as you say, a lot have gone back to work. And the other thing that we found is because we followed our normal procedures for recruiting volunteers with references and DBS checks and things like that, it has put a lot of people off. They thought they would just come along and pick up a phone and start speaking to people. So that is something we are talking about at the moment, whether do we need the same stringent methodology of recruiting volunteers, or can we do some shortcuts? We found it was, we obviously had to straight away stop all our face-to-face befriending, and we thought it would just mostly be telephone befriending, but then we found that that wasn't suitable for everybody, because if people had hearing impairments or speech impairments. So we've started pen palling either through the Royal Mail or through email. We've started some online stuff as well, which hasn't been a huge success, but we're learning from that as well. And we have managed to secure a small amount of money to take somebody on to train our volunteers in more digital knowledge, so that they can pass that on to clients, and it will leave us at the end of this funding that we've got with volunteers with the experience to continue helping people to join in digitally. And you know, a lot of people have been reluctant, but once they've got involved in it, they have you know, really enjoyed it. At our meeting this morning, we had a new client joining in, and he said it was absolutely amazing. He said he thought he would feel very self-conscious and nervous, but he thoroughly enjoyed the session. So that's good. And so we do plan to continue with that as far as we can, to include more people digitally and continue with the telephone befriending as far as we can, and the pen pals. So we've been fortunate. We've had volunteers from various parts of the world, let alone the UK, which has made it a bit more interesting as pen pals for some of our clients as well.
The situation will balance itself out, because as services come back online, as it were, when COVID restrictions are further lifted into some sort of back into normality as we knew it before, then perhaps these volunteers are obviously going back to work and other employment. We'll just balance things out as other services take over that were there in the first instance. I don't know, but it's just...
Well, we found now currently we have now once again got a waiting list of 40 people waiting for a volunteer to support them.
So there's a demand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Leslie, I agree with you about the paperwork for telephone befriending.
Yeah.
Because, you know, some of the people that, you know, that were really good, I've sent on to you, but I think the paperwork puts some people off.
The difficulty is we were the first befriending group in Wales that got the quality mark, and so we've stuck by that to follow the procedures, whereas other organisations haven't. So as I say, we are in discussion. Sharon and I are going to meet with Janet to see if we can simplify it a bit.
I think that would be good, because you know, telephone befrienders out there, but I think they just can't be bothered with all the paperwork.
No.
Claire, Claire, did you find that with your volunteers having to go through any sort of like formal introductions and things like that? Was that an issue?
The formal volunteers we did through PAVO, and really I think there was only about 10 what actually registered, and 5 of them were the prescription carriers anyway. And I chose people, if you like, I handpicked people what were already volunteering that I knew had current DBSs and everything to speed up the process at the time. So most of us, well, in fact, all of us had links to Lanny High School. So we all had current DBSs. So that was
big saving.
The other volunteers we had, we did no formal checks on per se. Lanny is a small town, we kind of all know everybody.
You tend to know everybody.
And the other thing is our volunteers they were simply delivering. They weren't actually entering people's houses. We knew which volunteer was going to which client, when they were going. So we kind of kept a string on it that way. We did try to get them to register through Volunteer Wales, but I think again they just wanted to, it was a here and now and they just wanted to help then. But whether they would want to formally, going back a bit to what the lady from Kerry was saying actually, people just wanted to help in the community as opposed to seeing themselves volunteering more widely.
I think you're quite right. So they've just given us the 5-minute call. So what do you want me to take back to the group? Because there's 2 things you've just said. It's the fact that after the COVID is finished, there's still a need that I've got a note down. So the question then is, you know, where we're going to draw the volunteers from. And there has been a comment being made about, you know, in certain cases the procedures are putting people off. Is that something you want me to take back to the group?
Yeah, also, Miguel, I think sort of moving forward, a lot of the people we're currently helping, they had an element of need prior to COVID. It wasn't, the ones we kind of got left now, the ones we're supporting heavily at the moment in terms of doing a lot of things, their need hasn't been down to COVID. Their need is down to mobility, a whole range of things that actually this group has helped them, but not really because of COVID. Their need was always there, and their need is always going to be there in the future.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is it is just being brought to the foreground even more.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think we've got a massive task on well-being, especially for the people who have been isolating. I mean, I spoke to one woman. She hasn't seen people since March. I took another lady for a flu jab. We were all masked up and everything, and she hadn't been in the car or on the road since February. I mean, there's a massive amount of work to do to actually reintegrate these people and give them that social circle back, because a lot of them have lost confidence as well.
So if I summarize that, to say that there will still be a need after COVID. That's probably as a result of the fact that there was a need there anyway, but COVID is just basically brought it to the foreground. And there is an extra comment being made that some of the procedures are putting people off. Yeah. Are we happy with that being put forward?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean they're going to call us back in any minute now. But yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and that's I have to say that's my experience as well, right across the board, and we'll just have to wait and see how that works. But yeah, you're quite right. It's linking the informal volunteers with the formal volunteers. There's an awful lot of informal stuff that's been done. Is how we can capture that informal stuff and keep hold of it. And I think that's a big ask.
Yeah.
You can carry on doing that. So yeah, I totally agree with you. So any other quick comments? We've probably got about 30 seconds, I think, before they call us in. It will happen automatically, so we'll just disappear out of the room. So, any? Yeah, there we go.
There we are. Okay.
We have to leave. All right.
Bye.
Thank you, Michael.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you. So the three questions that we've been tasked with having a discussion around are in the chat pane, as you can see there. So really we're looking at what we've learned from the past 7 months in dealing with the pandemic, and perhaps we can have a chat about some of the barriers that we faced. I know that Lawrence, your presentation was thoroughly inspirational, and it was very enjoyable to read. Have you got anything that you'd like to share with us about some of the barriers and how you've overcome them?
Thank you for that. It's just a pleasure to be here, I suppose. Barriers. I think the main thing I learned, apart from the obvious love that people have for each other, is that there are people out there who really, really do love the community they're in. And what struck me at the beginning of the pandemic was that I had no idea who these people were, and that I had no idea how the councils, the local community councils were run, or how things were organised within the village. And it became apparent that there were a few people who had been connected all their lives and had been the leading lights in the villages around the lake. But what shook us to the core was this being caught in the headlights and not being able to take those normal leaders and allowing them to do their work. They were either fairly elderly themselves or were restricted by understanding tech. So I'm not quite sure how it happened, but it just sort of happened that a sort of separate group was formed. We just sort of, maybe the younger people in the village decided, right, well, let's help out. And we were given a bit of freedom by these leaders, I suppose. And they were quite happy for us to take things going forward. But at the end of the period, maybe 2 months ago, when we sort of see a sense of normality, the groups sort of stepped back and allowed the normal leaders to carry on. But then the local lockdowns happened, and stump, we were back to it again. So I had to stand the group back up again. And now we're not, as I said before, we're not helping too much with the vulnerable or shielded. We're now helping each other just to be happy through the next few months. And that wasn't part of the deal to start with. It was really an emergency service type thing that we were doing, but not the sort of maybe wider aspect of mental health and things like that. We knew that perhaps we'd have to cover it in the future, but at the beginning it was really about the lower level of Maslow's needs of who needs helping at this moment today.
Thank you, Lawrence. That's really useful to know. I think you picked up on it as well in your presentation around engaging with the farming community, and obviously the rurality issues in Powys. I wondered, have we, what sort of challenges that you faced around that, and did you come up with any sort of techniques as to how you were able to overcome those?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, farmers are a group amongst themselves. As I chat, I'll try and share my screen and see if I can do it properly this time. We see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
No, I didn't know there was that many farmers in the area. And this happened about 2 months into the lockdown. And they did it themselves. We didn't Langos Together didn't organise this. They did it themselves. They wanted to be more part of the community. And I think in anything we did, anything that was organised, it just meant you were then connecting with another person, another group. But on our initial questionnaire list for volunteers about what they could offer us in their skills and services, we did have this line that said, would you like to be involved with helping with livestock and with the farming community? And we had about 18 people who ticked it as yes, but we were never able to really get them linked in with another farmer. And I don't know why.
No, that's really interesting actually, and that's perhaps something that we can look at and learn from and see, you know, how we can engage those volunteers with the farming community, to make sure nobody gets left behind, isn't it? Because obviously with the challenges of the geography of Powys, it's important that we don't let anybody fall through the net. So thank you for that. That's really useful to hear. Dominique or Carl, have you got any thoughts on what we've sort of achieved in the last 7 months, or any barriers?
I'll leave that one to you, Carl.
Before I come to that, Dan, I wonder if I could, what I'm intrigued by listening to these very inspiring accounts of what's been happening in communities, Llangors, of course, being a very, very good example of that, is, without wanting to be too philosophical about it, but a lot is often talked about as to what constitutes somebody's community these days. And so we talk about communities of place, communities of interest, and so on. And I just wondered, Lawrence, what your experience was in your own patch, really, because I know that very rural communities do have a much stronger sense of community of place than perhaps in the more urban areas. But when push came to shove, when you know, lockdown hit and so on, how connected was your community in reality? And did you find that you had to, if you like, establish or even strengthen those community connections, or did you find that actually everyone was connected anyway? Because what forgive me for going on a little bit, but what I often, and I've lived in very, very rural communities myself, and so often you hear people say, well, everybody knows everybody, and you know, whereas actually my experience is that that is not always the case. People can become isolated and lonely and disconnected. So and just to finish it, of course, for other people, their community could be the golf club that they're a member of, or I don't know, the Rotary group or whatever. I just wondered what your experience was of connectedness within your geographical community.
It's a very good question. I think I said it, touched upon it briefly in the presentation, that I've been in this area 7 years, and I probably took a lot from the community without putting much back into it. I turn up at events that have been held down in the village hall, and recently, over the past 2 years, my wife and I have joined the local drama group. But that's the first bit of actually joining something and doing something that we've done in 7 years. I think that it was just a lack of knowing what was out there to start with, because over the months, we then found out that whilst we'd done a Facebook page, there were already probably a dozen Facebook pages that have Llangors in them that were all little groups in their own right. Then they didn't sprout to be COVID-19 support, but they were there for pre-COVID. But none of them really came forward to do anything or to start connecting. They just sort of a little bit hesitant, I suppose. And we filled a little void, I suppose, just for a little bit, and that gave people hope. And then everybody just sort of said, right, okay, I think we'll let you carry on then, Langwards Together. You sort of got a little hub team going, things are happening. And one of the things that we did was really, really clever, was that we made these local coordinators part of the group, and the local coordinators were either councillors or leading lights in their own villages. And so I asked one of the ladies here in the village, and said, who do you know out there who's going to be pretty damn cross if we don't ask them to be part of this group in the hub team or mainly in the coordinators? And so we could see that they were just slightly reticent joining, and we managed to then get them, and they were then felt part of it. I don't know. I've been amazed, really. We hold regular tag up meetings. When it was first started, it was 30 minutes every week, and then it sort of waned off a little bit over the past months to once a fortnight. But we've always had the local coordinators at least once a month, and we've sort of allowed them to give us direction, and that's been just very important. I think you feel the community rather than just being part of it. And if I go to my phone, I've now got 4 WhatsApp pages of people chatting to me about different stuff. One of them being Christmas decorations, another one being about funding, and another one being about the Langwards Together page. So it's the setting up the communicating network was just so important.
What I can hear from you, Lawrence, is that almost like you feel a lot more connected to your community. So maybe there's a lot of other people similar to yourself. I love your phrase in your presentation, which was, it was like we're all in the headlights and all had to respond quickly. And by responding quickly, it sounds like you've gelled as a community and really well to deal with it all.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, not all plain sailing. We got our wings clipped a couple of times by some of the leaders, and they sort of said, well, why are you doing this? And that was for the village hall to do, and blah, blah, blah. And you go, well, okay, half of it was that you just couldn't go and do a face-to-face chat and grab them in a room and go down for a pint or something like that. And so you had to do this sort of strange thing, either with standing on a doorstep eventually, but or people who wants to use like message you, and you had early on we tried to stop messaging and say, right, phone us, or then Zoom came along and it all changed again. But people tried to have all these inward conversations in their heads using messaging rather than actually talking and starting to listen and just air what they wanted to say, rather than wasting time reading things.
Yeah. As ever, I just want to jump to the last question about future, and how, once this crisis, if you like, this external force, which brought a lot of people together, once that's dispersed a bit, how are we going to capitalize on the effort and energy and build that into a future infrastructure? Because there will be other external forces. The economy is going to be absolutely shot. There's going to be a lot of poor people, a lot of people being made redundant. How are we going to capitalize on the effort that's been put in and the resource and investment that's been put in to strengthen the future? Sorry, I've just...
Answer that in 1 minute. We've got 1 minute.
Sorry, I'll stop.
No, it's a shame we're limited by time on what we can get through, but that is a great question, Dominique, and it's definitely food for thought, isn't it? I think we're as connectors, we support many of the local COVID groups, and that's an issue that we're seeing from all of them. And you know, it started when, you know, the lockdowns have ended and people went back to their jobs and they didn't have the time to volunteer anymore. So we started to see that decline, and it is about how we can keep what we've got in terms of volunteers and that community spirit and build on it. And I think that's something that we're going to definitely have to, you know, have some good conversations about in our local groups as to what we can do. And I'm sure there'll be some really great ideas that come through that we can, you know, share with the rest of our networks.
For me, I think I'd like to see how French you do it, and with their like little mayors in each of their village communities, that be slightly closer, and they are a bit more prepared in being